Hi guys, today we are going to think a little bit more about reading scales, which is why we're in my kitchen, because this is where most of the things that I have that have scales are, and how we might use that information. So, I would like to show you how some of my scales work. My scales have a bowl at the top for putting what you're weighing in, and then a scale down at the bottom that you can read it off, and you need to twist the bottom round to line it up, so the red thing starts off being on the 0. The most important thing with any scale is to work out how much it goes up in, what the increments are. So I've got 0 kilograms and then 1 kilogram here, and it goes 0 kilograms, 200, 400, 600, 800, 1 kilogram. In between the 0 and the 200, there's lots of little lines. So the most important thing is to work out what each of those little lines represent. I know that between 0 and 200, the halfway line, which is slightly longer, is going to be 100. And between the 0 and that 100 line, there's 4 little lines. So I think, what is 100 split into 4? Well, it's 25. So each of these little lines represents 25 grams. So, let's weigh something. Got my onions in there. Let's have a look at the scale. How much do the onions weigh? I can see that the camera is picking up that little red line. It's in between the 200 and the 400, but it's not as far as that line in between the 200 and the 400 that would make the 300. So it would be 200, 225, 250, and I think it's sitting there on that 250 line. This scale is quite hard to use because it goes up to such big numbers. If I needed to weigh an enormous amount of onions, I could still use this scale. And so it means you have to think really carefully about whereabouts between 200 and 400 it is, and I think that is about 250. The scale I want to have a look at is a scale for measuring capacity. And the first thing to notice here is that there's actually 2 scales. There's a scale down this side which is in litres and millilitres, and the scale down this side which is in pints. Now I find it easier to work in litres and millilitres, so I'm going to look at this side. And just like the weighing scale, with this we look at what the gaps are between the numbers. So I've got 100, 200, 300, 400, and then half a litre, which you might know is 500 millilitres. So I can tell you that the gaps in between each one are 100 millilitres. And so the little line in between, so between 100 and 200, is going to be at the 50 millilitre mark. So it's going to go 50, 100, 150, 200, and so on. With that in mind, let's have a look at where the water level is in this jug. It's over 300. It's not as big as 400, it's just over that 350 mark, but only a tiny bit over. So I think it's probably about 355 millilitres in there just now. This next scale I want to show you is a thermometer. It's actually designed for temperature of sugar or oil, so it goes up really, really high. And it's got 2 sides to it as well, and it's got the degrees centigrade side and the degrees Fahrenheit side. Now normally I would much rather work in degrees centigrade, but clearly I got a bit too enthusiastic cleaning it, so there aren't really any numbers on the degrees centigrade side, so I'll have to go Fahrenheit instead. The principle is exactly the same. It's about working out what the gaps between the numbers are. So we've got 140, 160, 180, 200. So there's a gap of 20 in between each of those big marks on the scale. If you look closely, you can see there's a slightly longer line halfway in between. That's going to be the tens, isn't it? So it's going to be 140, 150, 160, 170, 180. And in between that little mark that makes the 10 and the mark that goes up to the 160, there are 5 little markings. So if you think about that being split into 5 bits, each of those little tiny marks is going to represent 2 degrees Fahrenheit. So it'll go 140, 42, 44, 46, 48, and then that line will be 150. let's measure some temperatures. So it's gradually coming to a stop, and we can see that it's right next to that 180 degrees Fahrenheit line. But I actually think if you look really, really closely, you can see it's a little bit above that, so it's more next to one of the little lines next to it. I think it's more like 182, maybe even between two of those little lines, making it 183 degrees Fahrenheit. Now that's a much bigger number in Fahrenheit than it would be in centigrade. In centigrade it would be more like 80 degrees centigrade. So it's not that it's gone above 100 degrees, it's not miracle water. And that water was so hot was that it had in fact come out of the kettle. And my kettle also has a scale on the side, and it's a really nice one because it measures cups. So it says 1 cup, 2 cup, 3 cup, 4 cup, 5 cup. But then it also has the measurement in litres as well. So it has 0.6 litres, 1.2 metres and 1.7 litres. And those are quite difficult to work out, aren't they? Difficult to work out what's between each scale. If we've got 0.6 here and 1.2 there, what's the one in the middle going to be? So there's a jump of 0.6 in between these two numbers. So the jump in between these two will be 0.3. So if this is 0.6, that's going to be 0.9, and then 1.2, and then this will be 1.4 and 1.7, counting up in 0.3s, which is quite difficult. So I can see in my kettle there's just a little bit more water than I would need for 3 cups of tea. What do you think that is in millilitres? Or in litres? In litres. What do you think that is in litres? So it's more than 0.6, it's more than 0.9, it's not as much as 1.2. It's not quite halfway between 0.9 and 1.2. I think there's probably about a litre of water in there. Let me know if you disagree. Show you is on this map. So useful, maps. It's got a scale down at the bottom, and it shows you how much on the map represents each length. So it goes 0, 500 metres, a kilometre, 1.5 kilometres, 2 kilometres. And it shows you that in miles as well. It says 0 miles, half a mile, and 1 mile. And you can see really easily what it looks like to compare the miles and the kilometres. So if I wanted to know how much 1 mile is in kilometres, I can just go up to here, that's where the line would be, and it's a little bit more than 1.5 kilometres. It's not as much as 2 kilometres, it's not halfway between the two, so it's probably about 1.6 kilometres. It's really, really great to be practising using these decimal numbers in our scale as well. So, have fun exploring around your own houses for things with scales. Have fun particularly exploring in the kitchen. I weighed onions. I think you can think of something much better to weigh than onions. Right, let me know how you get on. I'll post some challenges later in the day for you to do some more reading of my scales. Speak soon. Bye bye.